I think it's an incredibly huge problem. I think it seems rampant throughout a lot of sports, especially sports that are male-dominated and seem to require really aggressive male physicality. I think it's no wonder it may spill out past their job into other parts of their lives. But we're certainly seeing that in the States recently a little bit with the case of Ray Rice as well, who was caught punching his wife. And in that instance, he was suspended indefinitely from the NFL, from our football league. I do not know how a man who has that many counts of being convicted for that kind of violence, particularly somebody who has spent his entire life learning how to use his hands to be destructive.
7 counts of domestic violence, including punching women in the head.
Yes.
7 counts against 5 women.
Yes.
It's pretty shocking, isn't it? I mean,
it's incredibly
were you surprised at how many of the world's most powerful and richest people turned up and, you know, in fact, had a huge traffic jam of private aeroplanes in Las Vegas airport?
Yeah.
Just to see him?
Yes,
well, not just to see him, but to see the fight.
Yes, I think it's really shocking, and I think it speaks to the fact that there is a certain level of our society that is sort of accepting of violence against women, that it's like a way of life in some cases. It's one of the things that just exists in our society, and we just have to sort of get used to it, or, you know, accept that it happens. The world's a difficult place, and I think that if you don't address why it happens and the source of why it happens, you're not going to get rid of it.
Peter Singer, fight of the century. What does it tell us about ourselves? One of the combatants is someone with the serial counts of domestic violence.
Well, I think Adrian's right. It tells us that we're not really taking this seriously enough. And you know, if it was someone who had attacked people because of their race, there's no doubt that he would be out of the sport. The sport couldn't put on somebody who made a habit of punching people because he objected to whatever race they were. And the same would be true of football and any other sport. So, you know, why is it that you can punch women and the sport doesn't out you? I mean, I guess it's because these sports are male sports, and you're playing against, you're boxing or playing football against people of varying races, but you're not doing it against women. And so they don't get a say in the sport, perhaps.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, it's a huge problem in our country, and I know here it's violence against women. I think the current rate is approximately 2 women a week are killed by their partners. That's epidemic to me. And I think that if suddenly we found out that 2 men a week were dying at the hands of their female partners, people would really sit up and take notice. And I think we don't take notice because we have grown accustomed to some kind of violence against women in our society.
Greg Hunt, what do you think about we'll go back to the original question of the fight itself and Mayweather's role in it and what it tells us about ourselves. It's one of the biggest fights in history, and yet this man has this dark past.
Look, I actually think that's one of the very best and most powerful questions I've heard posed on this program over the years, and I have to say it was unexpected in the best way. It's provoking a new line of thinking. We refused his visa to Australia precisely because of the things that you set out, because of that history of violence, and in particular violence against women. He was deemed by the Australian government to be unfit to enter Australia. So effectively we did what Peter said. We ruled him out of our league. We weren't going to allow him in. I am frankly surprised that any sport would allow somebody to have a history of violence, particularly domestic violence, like that, and allow them to continue.
Mark Butler.
Oh, I agree. Violence against women, violence against children needs to be called out wherever it happens. And I think particularly this year we've been making some extraordinary progress in Australia in the community discussion around family violence, and to see that case is just such a distressing, depressing example of taking 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. But it's a terrible indictment, I think, on the sport.
How do we account for the fact that the fight promoters, the public broadly, the global audience, who paid most of them to actually see this fight, turned a blind eye to all of this?
I think it's appalling. Particularly for young men, sports stars are such an important role model. And sports like the AFL, the NRL here, and frankly boxing internationally should be taking an incredibly strong stand not to allow people with a history like that to continue to be a role model to young men. I'm appalled by that example. Absolutely appalled. I'd like to think it would not happen here.
You're on my football club. Different politics,
you're on
same
my
football club. So, OK, I'm on your football club. They would take a very, very, very dim view of a player caught in that position, and I think most of the AFL clubs would. I don't know about NRL, I know nothing about it, but the AFL takes the behaviour of players on and off ground quite seriously.
So what do you make of all the people who turned up? And, you know, like I said, some of the richest, some of the most powerful, some of the most influential people in the world and in this country turned up to be ringside at that fight.
Look, I suppose they try and excuse themselves by saying, oh, well, you know, he's been convicted, he's paid his price, and there's an element of that you can consider. But at the same time, people of great notoriety that must know that they themselves act as role models for other people, you would think could lend a hand by saying, no, I'm not going to that fight. And they just backed out of showing any leadership. And they don't back out on other occasions, so it must say something about them.
All right, let's